There are moments in life so sudden, so violent in their arrival, that they tear the very fabric of your world apart, and yet, from the violent upheaval, something extraordinary grows. That is where our story begins, on a narrow canyon trail that snakes through the rugged highlands where earth meets sky. Clouds, heavy and burdened, gathered like dark sentinels at the rim of the world. Hours earlier, the morning sun had bathed everything in gold, promising warmth and a clear path ahead. But by midday, a tempest unlike any other swept across the land. Wind whipped the dusty plains into a frenzy and sent birds flying toward shelter. Thunder cracked like a rifle shot. Then the flood came, not in a roaring river as travelers northward had feared, but like a living thing. The woman walked alone, her boots already muddied from long days of travel, and her heart beating to a rhythm tuned to survival. She was Apache, a daughter of the desert, forged by the sun and tempered by countless miles on foot. She'd come from a land of sage and rock, where the wind sang through canyons and life was measured in moments of breath and courage. She carried no companion, save for her own indomitable spirit and a handful of memories, family, firelight, songs passed down from her mother and grandmother. On this day, however, those memories seemed a world away as the sky splintered and torrents of water raced in black ribbons across the ground. What should have been harmless runoff became a raging river in seconds, a surge both merciless and unforgiving. She had been crossing a narrow wash, steep-sided and deceptively placid just moments before, when the wall of water struck. It was sudden, a violent surge that ripped at her feet before lifting her up like a feather caught in a storm. Her heart leapt with terror, and instinct took over. Arms flailing, feet scrambling, she fought a battle against a force of nature so powerful it seemed elemental in its fury. Rocks struck her limbs, smashing her ankle and tearing her clothing. The cold water, ice-biting and swift, stole her breath and forced her lungs to tighten, but somehow she clung to consciousness. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the torrent swept her clear of its fury and into a shallow bend of rubble, where she lay gasping, half submerged, battered, and violated by the violence of the instant. Minutes passed like eternities. The storm still raged, but the wash, now quiet as death, revealed what it had taken from her. Her clothes, torn and heavy with mud, were gone. Her water skin, food, all belongings swept downhill, vanished. Only her resolve remained, hard and bright, tempered by shock and pain. She tried to rise. Pain flared with every breath. Her ankle refused her command. She was alone, undefended against the elements, wounded, and exposed. Yet, in her heart burned the revelation that had always guided her: surrender was no option. She forced a breath and then another, each one a testament to her will. Her eyes, dark and unflinching, scanned the ravaged land. She knew the rules here were merciless, but she had survived desert suns and winter winds, she would survive this. She would walk. That was what she had always done. Hours passed. The storm lessened its wrath and retreated, but the earth remained sodden and unforgiving. The woman dragged herself toward a faint rise in the ground, instinct guiding her to higher, drier terrain. Each inch earned was a battle, each breath a triumph. The sun dipped toward the horizon when at last she rose on one knee, exhaustion and pain etched on her face. She saw it, a patch of ground above the wash, where shadows grew long and evening offered cool relief. But just as she began to move forward, a distant silhouette appeared, cutting against the amber sky. The shape was unmistakable, a man, broad-shouldered, riding on horseback. His gait was steady, his direction toward her. At first, she thought the sight a trick of her starving mind, a hallucination born of dehydration and trauma. But as he drew closer, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves became real. The horse trotted with ease across the uneven ground, and the figure atop it drew sharper into view. A rancher, perhaps, from the look of his hat and coat, clothing worn but sturdy and practical for life on this harsh land. He noticed her instantly, the way her form struggled with every movement, and without hesitation guided his mount downhill toward the ravine. The man's eyes were curious at first, then alarmed as he saw her wounds, saw her clothes torn and waterlogged, saw the pain that weighed her down. He dismounted, boots sinking slightly in the soft earth. He looked up at her, a stranger whose life had been torn apart by the elements. He could have passed by, continued his long route, unaffected by the misery of another. But something in his gaze softened. He spoke, his voice gruff but not unkind, though she could barely make out his words against the sound of the wind. Then he offered his hand. She stared at it for a moment, weakened but alive, and then, with a courage that had already carried her through so much, she took it. And so began their meeting, born of tragedy but destined to become something neither could have foreseen. The man helped her up and offered her his jacket first, thick canvas, dust-soaked but dry, a shield against the coming chill. She tried to refuse it, pride warring with pain, but he gently wrapped it around her shoulders without a word, letting his actions speak where words faltered. Her wounds ached, and the chill of dusk settled on her spine, but the fabric of the jacket offered warmth she hadn't felt since before the storm. He scanned the horizon, as if gauging the distance back to his homestead, then pointed toward a narrow trail that led away from the wash. She tried to speak, a whisper of thanks, but her throat was dry, and the words faltered. He understood nevertheless, and with measured care, guided her along the trail, half carrying, half supporting her until the two were once again moving towards something resembling safety. The land here was harsh. Sharp rocks, brittle branches that cut at ankles, the ghosts of brush fires etched into the earth from seasons past. But with each step she took beside him, guided by his steady hold, she felt hope, fragile at first, but growing warmer with every breath. As they walked, the sun dipped behind distant peaks, painting the sky in shades of fire and rose. The rancher spoke softly now, offering water from his canteen and asking her name. She answered, haltingly at first, then with greater clarity, and he listened as though her words were precious. He didn't rush her, didn't press for more than she could give. There was a compassion in his gaze that seemed out of place in this rugged wilderness, but it was real. They reached his small homestead just as the stars began to shimmer against the full darkness. The cabin was modest, rough-hewn logs, smoke drifting from the chimney, a faint glow of firelight through the single window. As she entered, he offered her a seat by the hearth and sent a word to his wife, for yes, he had family, to prepare broth and blankets. She sat quietly, exhaustion weighing every muscle, and watched the fire dance in the hearth. You could have mistaken her for defeated, but you would have been wrong. She was hurt, yes, and humbled by the violence of the day, but she was also alive. Alive because of her own will, and now, alive because of another's kindness. The broth arrived, warm, nourishing, and with each sip she felt a bit more strength returning. The rancher and his wife spoke softly, their voices weaving comfort into the room like threads of gentle light. That night, as she lay wrapped in blankets and warmth she hadn't known in hours, she thought about what had brought her here. A flood, a moment's misfortune, the randomness of nature and fate. She thought about the rancher, his steady hands, his quiet eyes, the way he had chosen to stop and help rather than ride onward in solitude. There was something profound in that choice, a reminder that sometimes the universe answers desperation not with thunder or wind, but with the simple goodness of strangers. Days passed, her wound healed slowly, and with each sunrise, she grew stronger. She helped around the ranch in small ways, gathering wood, tending the garden's edges, speaking to the children who came to watch her with shy fascination. And the rancher, whose name, she learned, was Samuel, offered gentle friendship, never pushing too close, always respectful of her space in her past. She spoke little of herself, but when she did, it was with a quiet grace. She told them about her home, her people, and the long roads she had walked before the storm, not in bitterness, but with the reverence of one who had known harsh days and yet chosen to press onward. One evening, as a deep orange sun sank behind distant mesas, she and Samuel sat on a low rise of land overlooking rolling pastures. The air was soft, and the scent of juniper and wild grass danced around them. She turned to him and spoke, her voice steady and calm. "You saved me," she said, the memory of that terrible day still sharp in her mind. "You could have passed me by and gone on your way." "I couldn't," he replied simply, as if there were no greater reason in the world for his actions. "We survive here together, or we don't." She looked at him, at the lines of his face softened by the golden light, at strength and kindness intermixed in his gaze, and something within her shifted. This land had thrown her into chaos and yet held out promise. Fate had struck, but compassion had answered. She looked at him with gratitude deeper than words. "You gave me your shirt," she said, a faint smile gathering at the corners of her mouth, "and you gave me shelter. But more than that, you gave me hope." Samuel nodded, as though he understood more than the words could ever say. It was in that moment, among winds that whispered of freedom and skies that held endless possibility, that she made a quiet vow within her own heart. She would never forget the storm, nor the kindness that turned it into something new, a beginning of healing, respect, and connection that changed the course of her story forever.